Audio. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's another late starting stream. I think this is actually going to become kind of common over the course of the hotter months of the year, which where I'm stranded living now is unfortunately a decent chunk of the year since I go around walking and collecting trash during the hotter months. I have to do it later, like around sunset when it's actually cooling off, because that's the only time it's bearable to do it. Set that as live. That's live. Hello, we got somebody already. That's all set. And Epic Pen did not initiate itself. We have to do that. Make sure that it's going to function. There we go. Okay, let me look at the sheet of stuff over here. Ah, so we got some large supposed changes to things coming, but I'll give a few minutes for people to show up, then we'll get into those. For the moment, we'll go through the Russia-Ukraine related stuff. So, non-stop drone and missile attacks on the northern or Baltic export terminals in Russia. There's two primary ones. Each one can ship out on oil tankers like 1.2 million barrels per day or something. One of them has had to actually shut down. So much damage was done that visibly no tankers have been coming or going from it for the past week or week and a half. So that is down. Some of that capacity could probably be transferred to the other one, but we'll see. Uh, and that the one that is down is at minimum going to be offline for probably a few weeks. Still looking for damage assessment on the Novorossiysk hits as that one, the primary Black Sea export terminal, which has a total export capacity of, I think, 2 million barrels per day. That one sustained substantial damage. Six out of seven of the, if you see in satellite photos, you usually see the lines go out like that. There'll be one thing at each locale, and a tanker can pull up at like each of those lines, and then it's like that, and it has all the pipelines and stuff coming out to each one of them. And sometimes there'll be multiple arms with multiple lines. Six of seven suffered some decent degree of damage, but not clear yet as to how long those six will be shut down for. But uh, assuming at least a couple days, if the damage was lighter, and then longer if not, but at least a couple days, that's seven in divide 2 million by seven, and you get roughly 300,000 barrels per day per one per each one. So that's roughly 1.7 or 1.8 million offline, at least for a few days from that one, as Ukraine's missile and drone attack wave capabilities have gotten much larger than they previously were. And I think that was that it? Oh, no. Uh, Nizhny up there, where one of Russia's larger refineries was, an attack wave substantially damaged that one. That provides roughly 10% of Russia's domestic fuel refining. That one was damaged in a recent wave to the extent that it now has to shut down for at least probably a week or two, maybe longer. Don't know, have to wait for clarity on that. And I don't know if it was in Voronezh or not, but Russia's largest rubber production plant uh, was also was also struck and has had to reduce some of its output, not stop, but it has had to reduce it by a bit. And general, at least one general, I don't know about the others. It was the only other specifications were that the other people on the aircraft were also officers of some rank within the Russian military, but one of them was a general. A smaller Russian military transit aircraft, something similar to, but obviously not the same as, like a Dash 8 or something, which is a Western civilian transit plane, but propeller aircraft, carrying officers of some varying ranks, one of which was a general, crashed in Crimea recently. That was not a shoot down. That one actually was uh, just continual degradation and slack off of maintenance. The engines seized up. And I think that's it for the non Iran war related stuff. So now we'll get into the actual Iran war stuff after I see who's here. Let me correct this. Let's see. Substituting one letter in a swear word is not the same thing as not using it. You can't get away from me like that. All right, so supposedly, whether or not it was actually going to happen, I don't know, but there was a quote unquote deadline of 8 p.m. night, which has now passed. Just before the deadline, a ceasefire, let me get the quotes ready for that too. A ceasefire was agreed to, supposedly, and it's not in place yet because it is contingent upon Iran profusely proclaiming to the global shipping community that it will not attack any vessel at all, and traffic resuming through the Strait of Hormuz at normal levels, not the current 10 to 20% fluctuation. So if they do so over the course of the next day or two, by Friday is supposedly the deadline for them doing that. And then those vessels actually begin to move and they actually leave, and no like Shahed drones are launched at them or anything, then the ceasefire will officially be in effect. And at the very least, the US will stop bombing Iran. Uh, Israel, I don't know. They're kind of on their mass warfare binge at the moment, but maybe they'll lay off for like a week or two and just focus on leveling Beirut and trying to wipe out Lebanon. But supposedly, if they do that and traffic flow starts going, then a ceasefire will be implemented, and the U.S. at least will stop bombing Iran, and Iran will stop launching missiles and drones at most of its neighbors. But there is probably a backdoor discussion, if this is even like legitimate, anyways. There's almost certainly probably a backdoor discussion was had, and I I know I mentioned this about any potential future negotiation stuff like weeks ago. There's almost certainly a backdoor uh, behind the back handshake between the U.S. plus Gulf nations and Iran that uh, Israel wants to be a wha- uh, wacky man, inflatable arm flailing tube man wild card right now. So uh, if probably an agreement that if Israel keeps attacking Iran on its own, that won't count, and Iran will quote unquote allow Iran to keep firing at Israel as long as it just stays between the two of them. So I almost guarantee you some form of backhanded agreement like that was also included in the supposed ceasefire negotiation because Israel has become not unpredictable for anyone who has an IQ above zero, but the whole world and the general public, quote unquote, and most politicians have an IQ below zero. So it is acting, quote unquote, erratically and unpredictably to according to most people. But anyone with pattern recognition and basic human psychology understanding can kind of see what's going on. So that is now in place or will be in place if Iran does profusely declare to the global shipping community that everything's cool and it won't attack any ships at all. And if the ships then start moving, then the ceasefire officially goes into effect. So oil futures, the price you normally see if you look up price of oil right now, you'll see a futures price. Like for example, one of the ones you'll likely see is this one here. So futures prices have collapsed, but that is the futures price or the market's speculation price, the gambling price, what the entire stock market actually is. Don't at me. I'm done dealing with finance bros. So that collapsed. It was before that. It was up between 110 and 115. The actual real price of oil, the physical price being paid by countries, companies, and etc. As like in the moment now, as they are actually buying and paying for shipments, whether it's a tanker or whether it's a certain amount coming through a pipeline, has stabilized in the lower to mid 140s. Today it was at $144. So this is the actual real price of oil. Now, normally, most of the time, it is the same as the market price. However, when people start playing games and the majority of investors, as they are now, are really stupid and are swayed instantly by different headlines and by the president's tweets, then the market price and the actual physical price of oil start to vastly separate from each other because they're existing in two different worlds. This one exists in the real world, where the rest of us also exist, and is governed by, like, laws of supply and demand and physics and everything. So previously, at different points during the conflict, it's been at different levels. The highest point the actual physical price of oil got to was $173 per barrel, and that was during the third week, I believe, 3 weeks into the deficit, and while the deficit was still rather large. Now, however, the deficit has decently shrunk compared to the initial cutoff because Iran is still able to export about 2.5 million barrels per day since their domestic consumption has effectively collapsed down to now only about 500,000, and they're producing just a little bit above 3. So that's out of the 17 million barrels per day that were originally flowing out through the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia has managed to max out its western pipeline and export terminal capacity at 7 million barrels per day. 1 million was already flowing and being exported normally via the Red Sea before the war. So that's only a net addition of 6. So that's plus 6 from Saudi Arabia, but That gives you a total of 8.5. The UAE is able to export about 1.5 through its Fujairah terminal over there. And so 1.5 plus 8.5, you get 10. And thus the actual deficit would be down to 7. And Iran has been not attacking any oil tankers coming and going through the strait that are going to or coming from Pakistan, India, or China, with a couple exceptions. There were 2 times over the past month or so where some of the drone launching crews apparently did not get the message and they did attack Chinese ships, but they were presumably, I don't know, black bagged and executed for that, since China is Iran's economic lifeline at this point. And as what I expected to happen happens, that vessels going out there would either A, say they're going to Pakistan, India, or China, with said governments also supporting them and stating the same thing, but then a number of those vessels would veer off and go elsewhere, with said governments of those 3 countries knowing that that's what was going to happen. And that has happened repeatedly, with like some tankers that were going to China supposedly actually went to Vietnam and the Philippines. One going to India supposedly actually went to Africa. I don't remember if it was Kenya, maybe. I'm not certain. But the amount that's actually gotten through that way has been about between 1 and 1.5 million. That gets you up to 11 or 11.5, which then means the actual deficit is down to between 5.5 and 6 million barrels per day out of the initial presumed 17 million barrel per day deficit. And the deficit being down to that is why the actual physical price of oil is stabilized for the moment, at least, unless something new happens in the lower to mid 140s, as opposed to around 170, the highest point that it got up to. So that's why it's down here instead of up there. Now, if the actual flow does resume, as Iran has supposedly promised to allow, then the physical price will also come back down, just more slowly and not in a sharp, irrational drop like the market gambling price. All right, check chat again. Let's see. Let's see. Uh, yes and no to the Arctic export question. I mean, we have stuff back up home in Alaska that goes in and out of the Arctic. Valdez doesn't usually completely freeze over, but sometimes it does. But we have plower or cutter vessels that just kind of break everything up enough to let the tankers come out. They could if they felt like it, but building new oil export terminals would take a few years at least and tens of billions of dollars, which Russia is a kind of, busy throwing all their money away in this one little misadventure of necro imperialism or empire necromancy. I'll get to the other people who I saw say stuff in a second. Let's see. So, for missile launches, Iran has launched successfully close to 2,000 missiles, with somewhere between 200 the 300 being destroyed on the ground and a lot of them technically underground. In a lot of those strikes that you might have seen the videos or pictures of, where they were like massive explosion like smoke billow plumes that looked huge and wide like volcanic ash clouds. Those were areas where a lot of a lot of ballistic missiles had been driven in and gathered, and they were either in buildings or they may have just been on like the tarmac apron and the vehicles were getting ready to launch them, and like several dozen were hit in one go. That's what caused some of those like massive things you may have seen the images from. So a couple hundred over 2,000, which would be roughly half of Iran's presumed missile arsenal. They still have way more drones, but missile arsenal, and they're not making any more missiles because the various factories associated with both the components and the missile assembly have been bombed by this point. So, them being at about one half of missile capacity, if the ceasefire does actually come through, them being down to one half capacity might be one of the, you know, bigger motivators behind them actually agreeing to it. For drones, they've successfully launched a bit over 5,000, with somewhere vaguely between 300 and 500 being destroyed on ground or underground. So in total, probably a bit less than, we'll put a down arrow, a bit less than 5.5K. And that's out of an unknown total number that is somewhere between 30 and 70,000, with again no new production because the factories have been destroyed. But even without new production, that's still at least 25,000 additional Shahed drones that they could launch at anyone at any point. The actual limiting factor in both is the launcher vehicles, because they do require specialized vehicles for the missiles. They're bigger and a bit more complicated. They have like gear and stuff and special computers and the arms that like raise up the missile and everything, draw the fins on it. The Shahed drone launching vehicles are less complicated, but they still require a setup. Usually it's mounted on the back of a truck, but it's like a multi-shelf system, and it has these little micro rocket catapults, like catapults, rocket catapult slingshot things that then launch the drones outwards. So those plus the crew, the actual military personnel who know how to operate them, would in almost any case end up being the actual limiting factor. And let's see, for some recent damage that was done in their most recent attack waves. They did strike and cause some damage to different parts of uh, Dubai Industrial City, which is a large petrochemical production complex in Saudi Arabia. In total, it's responsible for about 7% of the world's petrochemical production, but the entire facility isn't down. Two particular sections of it are out of, I don't know how many, like 10 or a dozen. So that is 1 or 2% of the world's petrochemical production offline for the time being. And those prices have gone up as well, obviously, since all this started. For some examples, polyethylene, which is the most common type of plastic, it's plastic that different bottles are made out of, whether soap bottles, water bottles, plastic bags, trash bags, all kinds of different stuff. Plastic packaging, uh, PE, or polyethylene, has gone from just before the war started, $1,020 per ton, I believe, up to, as of today, 1,356. Polypropylene, which is the next common one, which is typically what is what hard plastics are made out of, like bottle caps, uh, cases to cases to a lot of things, uh, plastic tables, etc. Polypropylene went from $948 per ton up to 1,415. Polyvinyl, which is used in various different compounds, including some of like the stronger plastics, like computer cases and stuff, went from 656 up to, at the highest point, 870. But recently, a couple days ago, it actually dropped down to 787. And rubber, petroleum rubber, which is what's used for most tires and most rubber that we use, anyways, went from about 1900 up to, as of today, about $2,650 per ton. And not a petroleum product, but a natural gas dependent product, urea, or nitrogenous fertilizer, went from 400 before the war dollars per ton up to, as of today, 708, and its record high price is just over 1,000, and that was during the first few months after the initial start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay, got that off and out. It is temporary. Supposedly it's for 2 weeks, and further negotiations will apparently take place during those 2 weeks. But what comes of those, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. No, no. The I mean, it depends how. That also depends how those now currently in power in Tehran act. Because again, like I've said before, from the Pentagon's perspective, i.e., those who are strategic, like strategic, broader picture, calling the shots, they, from their perspective, they don't actually care if the regime completely turns over and changes into a different set of people. If the current, like, if the current, like, radical Islamists would stay in power, but would disassociate with Russia and China and would acquiesce to whatever demands the U.S. made of them, then the Pentagon would be perfectly fine with them staying in power, and they could keep oppressing and blackbagging women who have their hijab off by like half a centimeter or whatever. They would not care if the previous regime before the war had suddenly ditched Russia and China and agreed to like whatever oil terms the U.S. asked of them, then that would be perfectly fine with the Pentagon too. The freedom of the Iranian people thing is just a public pretext. But as I've said before, Iran has openly agreed to allow outside oil industry to come in and start taking over some things, and has agreed to the no nukes thing, but the thing that they rejected was the demands that was being pressed on them of no more just missiles in general, no more regular missiles, ballistic missiles, or cruise missiles. So if it is going to completely stop, then it would probably involve us, at least the U.S., dropping that particular demand, which is no this and that kinds of conventional weapons. Even that's kind of an absurd demand that no one's ever going to agree to. So that one was probably we were probably kind of poked and prodded into adding that one onto the demand list in the beginning by Israel, since they normally would be the ones on like the receiving end most of the time, and they want Iran horrifically weakened anyways. Since Netanyahu said openly and publicly that it would be in their best interest if Iran became a failed state like Libya. So that that has and will continue to probably cause background friction between us and Israel if we depart from that demand and say that all right, it's fine, you can keep and make however many missiles you want, just no nukes, and outside oil industries get to like take control of the oil and stuff. In the meantime, if Israel does agree to and participate in the ceasefire, uh, for the time being, they'll just keep themselves preoccupied with leveling apartment buildings in Beirut and carrying on with the southern invasion. Let's see, we are at close to 1,600 dead civilians in Lebanon, and 5,000 people hospitalized or so. So uh, the hospitalized people obviously aren't dead, but they're people that are now requiring care for at least the next few days, and some obviously a lot longer than that, and are also thus then going to uh, start impeding Lebanon's economy because that's people who obviously aren't either working or buying anything. Close to 1,000 dead Hezbollah members, who most of which are also people who live in Lebanon. So total loss from the Lebanese population is around 2.6 thousand, 1,600 of which are just random Lebanese civilians, most of which were in Beirut. So Israel will be continuing with, as I've said repeatedly now, the intended goal in Lebanon, which is the same in Gaza and the West Bank, and which was the same in and will resume to be the same in Syria soon, and that is induced unlivability via repeated invasion and a constant, incessant, off and on bombing that's not not just kills people, because those numbers, to get to meaningful numbers on that end, it would take a lot more, but just keeps Lebanon down and induces a total malaise and continues to encourage Lebanese people to leave Lebanon, and thus continues lowering Lebanon's birth rate, which is now down to about 1.6, and depopulating Lebanon, who around the year 2000 or so was up between 8 and 9 million people. And since the 2006 war has declined down to under 5.7 million, primarily from people leaving. So the Israeli government was already kind of keeping that as a broader policy off and on in Lebanon, but now is just cranking the application of it up. And Gaza, obviously, close to 100,000 admitted dead. There are, and before the documenting system effectively collapsed, there were also 40,000 plus people still documented as missing or under the rubble somewhere. Well, it's been like 2.5 years, so they're not gonna miraculously come out of the rubble. They're also dead. But in reality, the number is somewhere in the hundreds of thousands because it's just been left. It's just been left to mire in uh, tiny constricted IV line drip feed of food and medicine. So everybody is constantly dying of malnutrition and of an awful lot of disease that would otherwise be survivable if not for the starvation and malnutrition and the deprivation of medicine. So the Israeli government is waiting until that population number gets down low enough to where it would be in whatever they feel like is an acceptable number that they can try to kick out and offload onto somebody and then annex Gaza. They're doing the same induced unlivability thing in the West Bank, just now cranked up to maximum. They're not bombing random stuff, but Israeli settlers in the West Bank are now just sort of being allowed to do whatever with complete impunity. And so dozens of people over the last month have uh, just been killed, whether shot or beat to death. Some even had like their residences burned down, as the settler communities are just roaming around and doing whatever. And so that is also now starting to cause some people to flee from the West Bank rather than wait around for the inevitable, which is what Israel is hoping that they'll do. They're not the waiting around part. They're the intent, similar to with Lebanon, is to try to get them to want to leave on their own. Uh, with Gaza, yeah, since the whole world has kind of just waved it off and sort of agreed by omission, agreed by not doing anything to just let everybody in Gaza die if that's what ends up happening. And they'll soon start doing something with Syria again because the induced unlivability thing in Syria was previously being done for them. The do nothing and still win strategy as the Syrian civil war kicked off and, had 5 different sides plus Russia bombing everything. So that Syria was taking care of itself in Israel's eyes up until the final overthrow of Assad and now the reunification. So decent chance in the near future they're going to start doing stuff in Syria as well. And now, similarly, they have publicly admitted in open statements that it's their goal for Iran to be collapsed into a failed state, similar to what Syria was for a decade and a half. And several strikes were carried out on additional infrastructure already, even before the 8 p.m. deadline thing and before the ceasefire agreement thing. 8 bridges were destroyed over various mountain passes and deep, like gorges and ravines up in the central northwestern portion of the country, west of Tehran, and down in Iraq. I thought Iraq was around like here, not Iraq, but Iraq, the city of Iraq. I thought it was a bigger city. I guess I was wrong. It took two scroll-ins for it to appear. But so yeah, there in Iraq, one of Iran's three aluminum smelting, aluminum refining plants was destroyed today. They have three plants that make aluminum in total. Iran domestically refines and smelts about 600,000 tons of aluminum per year, and this was one of the three plants, 200,000 ton per year capacity, that was destroyed earlier this morning. And also down in Bushehr, that's Bandar Abbas. Was Bushehr the one that's up here? Okay, I have to remember. Bushehr, the various port and harbor stuff was struck, including Iran's their domestic shipbuilding and military frigate construction yard, plus their repair dry dock setup as well. The war continues to spawn consequences outside of the actual region. Once again, I think it was in Florida, but I'm not certain. So once again, there was a bomb scare near a U.S. base in, I think, Florida, and also in Turkey at the Israeli embassy or Israeli consulate in Turkey. There was a big shootout earlier today, or it might have been yesterday. There's a few more things, but I'm going to check with you guys first. I just went. Oh, yeah, you saw that I just went through that. Water infrastructure. There was one trade-off early on in week 2 or 3. The UAE jumped into the war for like 2 seconds, bombed a desalination plant, and then pieced out after Iran sent a Shahed drone wave at one of their desalination plants. They didn't get to inflict as much damage as open skies bombing permitted to be done to Iran's, but they still did damage the one near Dubai a fair bit. But that one's kind of back up and running, while the one in the south of Iran is kind of gone. Iran does not rely on desalination for a lot of its water. It primarily relies on mountain rain runoff plus reservoirs, and a lot on ground aquifers, which I made that video about a while back, about how badly Iran's aquifers have been depleted. If you go down, when was it? A few months ago, I think. 3 months ago. Yeah, their groundwater aquifers are at a point where some of them, because remember, aquifers are not underground swimming pools or storage tanks. They are erratic patterns of permeability in rock that allows it to store water. And they're not all interconnected. There is actually like break offs and granite chunks and stuff where different portions are split from each other. Some portions of Iran's groundwater are actually going to run dead dry within like the next 2 or 3 years before we even hit 2030. With the rest of Iran's groundwater resources following suit over the course of the 2030s, if no changes happen, no water use drawdowns, no uh, sudden huge waves of rainfall replenishing stuff, which for Iran, for a country of, 87, 88 million people, that's uh, not the best news. As Tunisia over there, when Tunisia was getting close to completely running out of water, if Tunisia had to start importing literal water tankers as opposed to oil tankers, it wouldn't require that many coming and going. Iran would be in a different position, you know, because of having a population 9 times the size of Tunisia's, and also it would cripple Iran's agriculture, which would then result in Iran having to import way more food than it already does. As Iran's lands, its uh, viable lands put together, feeds about 75 million people. It's pretty maxed out. And their population, as said, is between 87 and 88 million. So they do have to import about 12 or 13 million people's worth of food. But this number, collapses as their groundwater starts going dead dry, then you're going to end up seeing them, or probably will actually, not even would, but will see them end up in a position of suddenly going up to having to import the equivalent of like, 20, 30, 40 million people's worth of food, which is a lot more expensive and a lot more politically dangerous than only having to import like 10% worth of your food needs. The the richer Gulf nations, are able to do it and get away with it because for one, most of them have really low populations, and for two, as implied by their name, they're rich. The only exception alongside Iran to the rich Persian Gulf nations rule is Iraq, which is also in a really, really bad water position right now. But that's a subject for another time. Market prices collapsed in the last few hours, not the physical price that people are paying. That's not the physical price is not going to collapse until or unless the condition upon which the ceasefire is predicated actually happens and tankers start actually coming out of the Persian Gulf, and thus the still remaining 6 million barrel per day global deficit disappears. The physical price being paid by actual upon recipients of actual physical shipments of oil is down into the 140s, as it was up at the highest point. Some were paying 173 but that was at the highest point of deficit about 3 weeks into the war. It has since gone down from that. Last week it was more around 150. Now this week it's been lower to mid 140s. Primarily, yes, because of the amount of deficit reduction from the maxed out export pipeline going west. And more stuff will be shifting in the future, as Iraq and Jordan already did the Arnold Schwarzenegger and whoever the CIA guy was in the Predator movie muscle handshake thing on a new pipeline. They're going to get started as soon as possible to run oil from Iraq's main fields over through Jordan and out through the port of Aqaba instead of sending basically all of it out through the Strait of Hormuz. And now, oops, no. And now, as expected, some talks have popped up between Qatar, the UAE and Oman about potentially running a pipeline for those two's oil down out through Oman to be able to have that be sent out outside of the Persian Gulf if need be. And potentially Kuwait would then either, because of bad blood history, probably not with Iraq, but they also really won't want to do it with Saudi Arabia either, but they might not have a choice. They might proposition to sign on to some like extension or expansion of the Saudi east to west pipeline and have a connector of their own installed into it. So a net end result of this war, one way or another, is that the actual export routes are going to become far more diversified as opposed to just everything always going through the strait. Let me drink some water again. Actually, let me get one more chug. Oh, okay. Uh, Same as before. Uh, Good news this week. Yes. From within India, I, upon checking recently, since I have several medications that I rely upon, uh, having to having to do with the whole otherwise would be permanently nauseous thing. So a lot of medication, a lot is now made in India, and a huge amount of it is specifically made right here, right within basically a arid, more deserty region, which is not good, and also within like the eminent strike zone for when the inevitable bigger India-Pakistan war happens over water. However, I learned whether that's the reason they did so or not, the companies manufacturing the medications, at least the ones that I take, have begun diversifying their locations and have actually been have started making some medications now at at manufacturing plants, at pharmaceutical plants elsewhere in the country that they just started up over here in which state is it? Karnataka, I think. So over there, which is somewhere with better water guarantees, and also is not on the border in the strike zone. So that is one of my actual personal connection fears is when that whole thing starts. Uh, Likely still not for like a decade or a decade and a half, but I would like to not get cut off from my anti-perma nausea medication because before I actually started getting it, way back when everything first began back in 2013. Uh, Man, better times. I still lived back up home in Fairbanks, Alaska. That was long before 2020 happened and my life was destroyed. But yeah, those few weeks before I started actually getting the medication, after the condition first started, it was like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 nausea perpetually, sometimes 11 out of 10. But since then, at least on the daily one, it's been usually between like point 0.5 and 2 out of 10, which the lower end of which has kind of just blurred into background noise for me because it's been so many years at this point. But yeah, they've relocated some stuff over here. I'd prefer if the CEOs and administrators of said companies are listening to me. I'd prefer if they diversified even more, like globally, and started moving production like around. Because regardless of who the country is, it's really bad to hyper centralize production of things, especially critical things, in like one country or just a few specific countries. And also, let's see, Artemis 2 was successful. The did the pass around the moon. I have to go out to my regular stuff. So they also went the farthest from Earth any human beings have in history. Previous record was Apollo 13 at 248,655 miles. Artemis 2 crew went up to 252,000 miles. And so we broke that one. And oh, wait, I have to go over into lights for more stuff. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, that happened, which was awesome. There were like various other things of good news last time on the last stream. There was stuff. There was so if I don't know if you saw that one, then you'll know. But I won't be going down that list again because I want to stop soon. Oh yeah, X that off. And for anybody who's here and who is new or doesn't know, I shouldn't have X'd that off just now because I was going to go right back here. If you go under any video in the last 2 years or under this very stream, go to the description. You will see there's the PayPal and Patreon links, plus the super chat button somewhere or whatever. If you want to support me, just only do so if you actually can. But there is also this, the free to access drive folder. You click on that, it opens up this drive that I maintain with folders full of all kinds of different graphs that are free to access for anybody. You can use them for whatever. There's no paywall. If you get rich or you like, I don't know, make a lot of money somehow, if you could throw me 2% of that, maybe that would be awesome. If you like make a video of your own somehow and you get like $10,000 of ad revenue, uh, because I certainly don't. But like, yeah, for example, here's like oil production graphs. Then you have the oil demand graphs for each country. And then you have other things like electricity demand graphs and generation by source for different countries. We get a pie chart breakdown, and I try to keep all these updated as best as I can. They're not going to look the nicest because I'm not Forbes or I'm not the Financial Times or whatever. But most of them and most other like websites that you can get graphs and stuff on are starting to put things behind paywalls now. So I started doing this like a year and a half ago because I wanted there to always be something for everybody where you can get said for the few people out there like me that like having explicit infinite graphs of everything. I wanted there to be something for everyone that is not behind a paywall, like, Reuters, Forbes, Financial Times, even tdeconomics.com, like the one we showed earlier, or here, go through this one. See, Saudi Arabia, you can still get the short term stuff for now. Can you still go up to 10 years? You can still go up to 10 years. But if you try to go beyond whatever the last year marker thing is, you hit the paywall. But no, here there is no paywall. That will always be free to access. Okay, so probably gonna end soon. Uh, I I have never I've personally never seen or heard of medications manufactured in Sri Lanka. Uh, I would recommend against that. That is also like a really unwise choice because Sri Lanka has this habit of nationally collapsing and having near Cuba-esque like total grid power grid collapses. So I would recommend moving out of there too. Just more diversity of locations in general, but also for India specifically, stop putting stuff in like the arid portion of the country. If you're moving stuff over to the east there, that's good. But move some stuff over to other locales like uh, I trust Malaysia with basically anything at this point. Vietnam too. You guys are awesome. The the shoes that especially shoes, man. Any when I get my whenever I get a new set of shoes, a new set of sneakers, always check the inside tag. I try to get ones made in Vietnam because every time I have a set made in Vietnam, it takes 5 to 6 years for them to wear out. And this is from me who like walks around a lot. Like, usually spending 2 hours a day hiking all over the place, picking up multiple bags worth of trash because I'm stranded living in South Carolina now, where which is full of rednecks, and part of redneck culture is throwing your beer cans out the window of your pickup truck. So there's shoes made in Vietnam, last me like 5 or 6 years. Uh, this time and the last time, I could not find any of the kinds that I wanted that were made in Vietnam. So got made in Indonesia instead, which are still good. The ones I've been wearing up to now are 3 years old, and they're probably going to be done for by the end of this year. So 4 years, 3 to 4 years versus 5 to 6. But the one time I got a pair that was made in China is like barely 2 years. So for shoes, sneakers, you want Vietnamese, absolutely. But for like all your electronic stuff and almost anything else, batteries, plastic, plastic things, Malaysia, I trust you guys with basically everything. Uh, yeah, you see, for acetaminophen and ibuprofen, those are two instances where I I do actually only get the on-brand version, actual Tylenol and actual Motrin. Actual Tylenol and Motrin are made in the U.S. Most of the most of the regular Motrin, not the child Motrin liquid, but the regular pills. Most of those are made in Texas, and the Tylenol is mostly made in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Uh, because same with actual brand pseudoephedrine. I only get on brand pseudoephedrine because it's a toss up when you get the generic version of whether it was made in somewhere that isn't China or whether it was made in China. And on multiple inspections, including from China's own pharmaceutical inspection agency. So you don't even get to put it on like outside anti-China bias. Their own like Better Business Bureau equivalent inspections have repeatedly caught their generic manufacturers for ibuprofen, acetaminophen, and pseudoephedrine uh, hacking stuff. And I'm not talking about drug shipments. I'm talking about like only, uh, or sorry, not packing, padding the numbers, only mixing like 40 to 60% of the actual supposed amount and just packing the rest with more cellulose filler so that they can pump their numbers, so that they can both secretly cut costs and also pump up their manufacturing numbers, thus making it look like they have some magnificently better process and like they're a lot more efficient. They can churn stuff out more so that they can get more of that investor cash inflow. As it's not just a U.S. thing or a Europe thing or a Russia thing. It's a global thing now. Uh, the whole the whole world is turning into self-cannibalizing financialized economies, and what isn't that is pump and dump schemes. Let me drink some more water. I'll give chat one more read down to see if I missed anything else, and then that's probably going to be it. And I apologize for the latest oil production levels video for non-OPEC members, at least, not being up yet. I'm still waiting on the EIA to release the data. They're supposed to do it at the very start of the month, but they've, for the past like 2 or 3 years, they've really been slacking off. You know, it's not really not that difficult, guys, to input numbers into a spreadsheet. I kind of do that all the time. That's how I make the graphs, obviously. But for the data provision, they're literally just putting numbers into a spreadsheet that then show up on a spreadsheet that you can look at on their website. It's not that hard. You know, hey, DC, Washington, if you're finding that like so unbelievably difficult, because all the current administration hires for every position is like uh, really Twitter radicalized Zoomers, you know, I'm not part of the Trump cult, but I know how to put numbers into a spreadsheet. You want to pay me something above minimum wage, preferably, but I can put numbers into a spreadsheet if you guys are hiring. All right, doesn't look like anything else is coming up. I'll give it a few more seconds. Oh, yeah, hold up. Sorry. One other thing I forgot I was going to show, since I even took a picture, an additional picture for it. So, as consequences, uh, as actions have consequences, continues to stack up. Uh, Gas prices in the US have overall, it varies by region, obviously, but risen by about $1.50. So this was before I snapped this picture just because I wanted to see if I could get a decent looking shot of the glowing sign through the mist while we were driving up to West Virginia, right back on before the war, right before the war started on February 28th. So this was before the war. It was about 250, or this one was 260, and this was earlier today. So for the general area around where my parents live, it has gone from about 250 up to now $4 per gallon, just avoiding $4. Uh, all the stations have gone to 399.9 because they no, none of them for the moment wants to be the one that breaks the psychological price barrier of having a four as the front number. Uh, Diesel, they don't necessarily care about because the majority of people are not buying diesel. Companies are buying diesel. Uh, corp Companies, corporations, and the only regular people, actual human beings, and not like corporate entities buying diesel are going to be truckers, which are, not a giant portion of the general public. But for the general public, none of the stations want to be the first one to actually put a four as the front number. But before this week is over, probably one of them's going to have to do it. I'm going out again tomorrow uh, as a late birthday gift to Josh, the one who is usually the moderator for the chat and is at this point my only remaining friend, apart from being my best friend before, which is probably why he's my only remaining friend at this point. But we're as a late birthday gift, we're going down to this buffet place called Golden Corral tomorrow. So on the way there, I'll check and see if any of them overnight uh, bumped it up to four or over four. But essentially, that is four because it's 399.9. So from 250 up to $4. Oh yeah, I know some people do have diesel vehicles. Like our neighbor Donnie, one of the only people down here in this forsaken place, known as the American South. One of the only people around here who is like actually competent at their job. And actually, Donnie is like beyond competent. He's like if competency at his work as a professional driver of all kinds, whether just moving vehicles, driving trucks like freight trucks, or operating like heavy vehicles down near the port. If that convert that to like an IQ test, basically, then he would should be like at the literal 200 cap, because he maneuvers flawlessly no matter the scenario or the vehicle. But he's like the only one, because we've we were passing people on the highway plenty of times that basically like the second Final Destination movie. We've passed by so many around here, truckers who were driving trucks and were literally chugging a Bud Light bottle, or I don't know, whatever the other common al uh, piss grade alcohol that Americans like and that Europeans laugh at them for, whatever the other major brand is. But we've seen like big truck drivers literally drinking while driving, not driving after having already drunk, but literally drinking in the midst of driving. Uh, but yeah, Donnie's like one of the only people around here who's actually competent at his job, and to make up for everybody else, he has to be super competent, and he is by all means. But okay, that's it for now. I'll see you guys around next time.